Today I'm going to be turning one of my little thumbnail studies, this one here, into a larger painting. So I'm going to be using this as a reference throughout. I've also got a photo on my phone. I probably won't be looking at that as much because I find that photographs are, as we know, quite deceiving when you're trying to paint from them. So I'll probably be using this more frequently. Now what I'm going to do first is start with the darkest values. Let's do it. I'm using this large flat brush because I think it gives you more of a painterly style, which I quite like. I've let these sit for a little bit while I went and had some lunch, so they've gone a little bit sticky. If we look at the reference photo, you can see where the darkest darks are. So I'm just going to start mapping those out. It might look a little bit chaotic at the start, but hopefully it starts to come together as we go on. It doesn't always, but you just gotta hold that hope. So as you can see, that does not look like much right now, but it's just the starting point for building up the rest of the painting. So we'll just let that layer dry. That's about dry enough for my standards. I like to try and cover as much of the page as I can early on so that we can get a better idea of the values. So I'm going to start adding more of the actual, I guess, a local colour that's found in the scene. And this will still be quite dark. We've got the darkest darks in there, but we're going to start to build towards the light slowly. I like to do it all quite incrementally. Kind of just went straight into the burnt umber there without really thinking about what I was doing. I actually want some greens. So let's go back and get some blue, ultramarine blue, and perhaps this one here. What is it? Titanium gold ochre. You can see the paint's quite tacky at the moment. So I've blocked in some big chunks of green. I've made this section here lighter and more saturated than what's behind it to try and help with a sense of depth. It can be quite hard to keep that depth when you're working with lots of greens. If you're not careful with the saturation and value, it can end up looking quite flat, which is something I definitely struggle with. So now I'm going to block in these beautiful, warm, glowing yellows and oranges from the cliffs, which is a really enjoyable part. Lots of this titanium yellow ochre. But once again, we're wanting to keep this quite dark in these initial layers. Adding a touch of this red, what is it, quinacridone violet I think, because obviously adding blue and yellow together makes green and we don't want that for the cliffs. A flat brush is fantastic to use for rocks and cliffs. You can be really loose with your marks and just sort of let the shape of the brush sculpt out all those jagged edges. So here I'm painting that cliff that is in, I suppose, the midground, We want it to be more obvious than the background, but this is really the main event. We don't want to take away from that too much. And as we move further forwards, increasing the saturation again and making it quite a bit lighter too. Adding this yellow back in to make sure that it looks cohesive and it doesn't just look like this random yellow triangle at the front. Now I'm going to work on this big blank section down here so that we don't just have a big white chunk. I feel like it's hard to see what the rest of the composition needs when you've got something like that there. I've got Helio Blue here, which is really intense, and I'm contaminating my white completely with that. Oh, really regret not going into the white first. The water here was really churned up and full of sand, so I'm actually going to add the titanium gold ochre to that to give it a green tinge. And we want it to be a bit darker. We'll try that. It's a really warm day and gosh, these are drying out quickly. Woo, that was a bit much. Oh, they're all gonna mix together now. Oh well. So the sand, I might start a new pile over here. That's the wet sand, and then the dry sand is going to be a lot lighter. And then we've just got the sky to put in. And I think I might keep that really simple actually, because there's a lot going on in this composition. I do my skies with quite a thin mixture, just because it gives it a bit more of a flat, smooth appearance. Unless it's like a cool stormy sky and you want some texture. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, I might let those layers dry and then we'll start with, making it look like an actual painting and not just a few random blobs of colour. Trust the process, it'll start to come together. Alright, now for the fun part. I'm moving down to a smaller brush because I want a little bit more control for this part. Now let's start with the further back elements. So we'll get this sticky white and go into my cliff colours here. So once again, I'm just going to really creep up on the values, and I think I'll leave that like that for now. And if it needs to be lighter, we'll come back to that section once we've done everything else. So now I'm going to put some lighter coloured foliage to start to give more shape to that cliff back there. When I'm painting leaves or bushes or shrubs or whatever, I tend to dance around on the paper like that and just use the corner of the brush to give more random marks. Each time I come back to my palette, I'm actually picking up a slightly different shade of green or a different colour. So adding a bit more blue, a bit more yellow, little bits of brown. Might leave it at that for now. And then we'll move to this next section here. So we're getting a bit more, we're getting closer. So I'm going to make it lighter and more saturated. When I say closer, I mean closer to the viewer. So we'll start with this. A bit of water to loosen it up. Ugh, there's a hair in there. Hate that. I'm holding the brush right at the end to give a bit more randomness to the strokes. And you can leave that darker layer behind, peeping through in some spots, and it should give it the sense of having cracks and crevices in the rock that the light can't get to. Moving forwards again to this closer rock. So we're going to add even more of this yellow, lighten it up some more. Tiny bit of burnt umber and try and model out this shape a bit. I'm not really looking at anything in particular here, I'm just doing random brush strokes. See what happens. Bit of dry brush. Let that dry and then we'll work on the vegetation. I might actually, I'm going to add some of this lemon yellow to give some more saturation and oomph to the vegetation at the front here, because it'll really help separate it from what's behind. And I'm basically just going over all the sections that I'd already mapped out with the dark green, so I don't have to think too much about where I'm putting this. Add some brown in there, a bit more interesting. Some directional brush strokes to give the sense that that's steep, and the vegetation's sort of tumbling down into there. Re-establish some of those darker greens, especially down in this sort of gully section here. If you're someone like me that gets carried away, doesn't matter, you can just go back in, put some darks back in. Alright, let's stop fiddling with that for now. And this dark here looks a bit weird at the moment. I think I'm going to have to warm it up a bit, make it more that rock colour. So we're going to keep it nice and dark, but at the moment it's almost like an indigo colour, which I don't think is quite right. And I'm going to make this bit here dark because the water is touching this section when the waves come up, and the wet rock is darker than the dry rock. Now we're going to move up another step with the value to make it a little bit lighter again, starting with, once again, this further back section. Now I don't want to add this everywhere because that would just take away the focus and make it look quite flat as well. So I'm just going to add some light right at the top of this, what would you call it, escarpment? Just to look like the sun's hitting the edges of this, but it's not getting through to that darker section there. And I'm also going to lighten up parts of the rock down here. And now moving forwards again, we'll come back to our delicious white and yellow mixture. And because we're doing this rock here, I'm gonna mix it into this mixture which had a bit of the burnt umber in it, because that does knock that back just a little bit. Or if you add a bit too much like I did just then, it knocks it back a lot. Now it's good to be a bit conservative with where you put the lighter sections, because you don't want the whole thing to be light, because then it takes away all the emphasis from it. So just in the most important places, I think. So down here, I think it is important to have, because that's quite an important section where the rock cuts out across the water. And along here, to really separate this layer from the background. I might actually add a little bit more of these darks in, just to emphasize certain spots. And the real fun part, this main focal point. So I'm putting a fair bit of yellow into that and no burnt umber, so it'll be quite bright. Cool, gonna take a step back and see what it needs now. And now we're going to lighten up the vegetation again, or add some more highlights to it actually. Ooh, that's sticky. The sand down here is wet, so we're going to put the reflections of the cliffs in there. That should do it, and it'll look less odd once we put the texture of the wet sand and some of the waves in there. Maybe we'll work on the water a bit now. So I'm gonna add a bunch of white to our water mixture. At this beach, there's usually huge swell, And there's so much energy in the water, so it's really foamy and full of air bubbles. So I'm going to try and create that sense of movement. Ugh, my battery died on my camera. Anyway, where were we? We were doing the waves. Let's get back to that. The sun's gone down now, so I've had to turn my studio lights on. I was like mid-thought as well. I think I was doing this bit along here. I'm standing back now just to see what it needs, more from a like abstract composition point of view. I'm gonna make this a bit lighter here, so there's a bit more of a definitive edge between the wet sand and the dry sand. And I might also add some more really bright lights up in the foliage and along this rock, just to really give it that emphasis. I might add just a tiny bit more up here too. Now I'm not using any white in this green mix. Instead, to lighten it up, I'm just adding more lemon yellow. So the white lightens it, but it also desaturates it, which is a bit of a pain sometimes. What do we think? I'm thinking I might just leave it at that. It's funny because it doesn't have the same, I don't know what the word is, the same painterliness, I guess, as the little thumbnail that I did. Because I actually really love this little guy here. Anyway, I'm pretty happy with it though. Let's just get straight to the tape peel, see if it actually works this time. Honestly, that's like stuck to the, like a cardboard bit. What? Well, here it is, the finished product. And I'm going to sign it. Which didn't really work. Maybe this will work. Let's try this. Okay, this will surely work. There.